So, connections and responses. Allow me to begin by looking at this word connection, which can be applied both to a purely mechanical process and also to a highly emotional experience. For me, it presents ideas of joining, linking, bonding, sharing, finding things in common, belonging, ideas about touching, physically touching another's hand, or emotionally touching another's heart, and sometimes a meeting of minds. Where would we be without our connections? In the higher echelons of society, an important requirement for climbing the social ladder was, and sometimes still is, to be well connected, meaning, of course, to be related to the right people. Business people ensure they make connections with those who may be able to assist them in furthering their business goals. Remember the old adage? It is who you know, not what you know, that helps you to get on. And religious groups and societies and clubs of every kind run outreach programs, which are all about connecting with potential new members. All these things are probably necessary for the way society currently operates, but may not be good examples of true connectivity in the theosophical sense. The sort which looks beyond physical and material attributes and advantages. What we refer to more as soul connection, that moment when you recognize the divine spark in a fellow being, the divine spark at the very core of all beings, but easier to recognize in a fellow human or perhaps a beloved pet than, say, a cockroach or a pesky fly. When I first began to think about this word connection and what its results may be, some very simple everyday analogies came to mind. If you had a little box containing a collection of beads, either precious pearls or just plain glass beads, they would be pretty little pieces, each in their own right, but not much use and would probably spend most of the time in the box. If, however, they were strung together or connected, they would be even prettier, able to be worn or used as adornment of some sort, enjoyed and out of the box. And likewise, if you had random little pieces of fabric strewn about the house, whether common printed cotton or precious silk, they would be useless. However, stitched together or connected, they would become a beautiful and useful patchwork quilt. Are our human lives a little like that? Are connections to others what make our individual lives, either grand or humble in their own right, more useful and beautiful? I believe maybe so. Young children's activity books often have join the dots pictures in them. An adult can frequently see what the picture represents before even joining the dots. The small child, though, needs to work at joining them before the picture is revealed. Perhaps highly developed and perfected beings, such as the masters, are the adults who know what the picture should look like, and we are the children joining the dots or connecting. Some of us are perhaps just picking up the pencil, while others are almost at the last number. We are, however, all in the same room, working on the same picture, so maybe working together in groups or connecting helps to complete the picture more quickly. We all well know that in recent times the winds of change have blown a force 10 gale in regard to how we communicate. The current technology ensures that we are able to remain connected with and communicate with much more easily with many more people than ever before. And of course this is a wonderful tool for sharing information, greetings and messages. Those who are busy social media buffs are able to know more about their fellow humans everywhere. Distance and time are no barrier. Raising funds, for example, through a Give a Little page, can be almost instant for desperate causes, and new ideas spread swiftly. It's possible to keep up with events in the lives of families and friends right across the globe who may in the past have just become distant memories. All these are convenient means of keeping connections alive and interesting. We know too that there is a very dark side to all of this, which I'm not about to discuss today. However, what we do need to consider is that perhaps this sort of quick and easy connection can minimise the importance of proper, deep, face-to-face connectedness, which we obviously cannot cultivate with everyone we friend on Facebook. Let us not overlook and neglect authentic relationships and connectedness through happy times and difficult ones with those fellow beings we live and work with each day, our families, neighbours, work associates, and so on. There may be times when we wish we did not have to share space and life with them and wonder why we do. I dare say the Lords of Karma could answer that question. If only they had a website. We inhabit an apparently overpopulated world, and yet so many people are lonely and feel isolated. Think of those who are frail, disabled, in prison, some elderly folk, neglected or bullied children, or people suffering depression. Imagine how difficult or impossible it is for some of these people to become or to feel connected or belonging somewhere. And then imagine what a huge difference some link to others or even another would make to their lives. There are charitable organisations trying constantly to address these issues, and they're always seeking volunteer workers. But even in small ways, in our own immediate communities, we can address some of these circumstances and effect a change, a visit, or an offer of friendship, or simply lending an ear and being mindful and aware of people's feelings and situations can make a significant difference. These gestures cost little more than a loving heart and a will to do something. On the subject of our undeniable connection with one another on the deepest level, the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran wrote these beautiful words. My soul counselled me and assured me that I am neither higher than the pygmy nor lower than the giant. Before that day, I beheld mankind as two men, the one a weakling whom I derided or pitied, and the other a mighty man whom I would either follow or oppose in rebellion. But now I know that I was formed even from the same dust of which all men are created, that my elements are their elements, and my inner self is their inner self. My struggle is their struggle, and their pilgrimage is mine own. If they transgress, I am also the transgressor. And if they do well, then I have a share in their well-being. If they arise, I too arise with them. If they stay behind, I also to accompany them. Forgiveness, crime and punishment are very big topics and not something there's time to examine closely today, and neither do I claim any expertise whatsoever on these issues, particularly with Mr. Self-Confessed Jailbird / Corrections Officer David Bland in the audience. However, I am going to just share a few relevant thoughts. If someone commits a crime or offence and is caught and accused, there's usually a court case, evidence is produced, sometimes a brief victim statement is read. A jury decides the guilt or innocence of the accused, and a judge pronounces the penalty, often a prison sentence. We know this process does not always and automatically create remorse from the offender, nor peace of mind for the victim. There is another way, and this way may only work in the case of what I call lesser crimes: theft, vandalism, burglary, careless driving, or drunkenness, which causes harm or damage to others. This way is restorative justice, which is described as, quote, a process to help repair and harm caused by criminal behaviour, unquote. The process involves victim and perpetrator meeting, face to face, connecting, in other words, in an ordinary room, not the formality of a courtroom. The meeting is obviously facilitated. The victim gets to face the offender and explain how the wrongdoing impacts on them and their daily lives, and to ask questions. The offender has to listen, has to face an actual person, and not simply think of a faceless victim or anonymous property. The offender too has a chance to speak. Both parties have input into how things can be put right and make a plan to prevent these behaviours from continuing. I believe from several talks I have attended that this often has a more satisfactory outcome than the conventional process. Actual remorse and true forgiveness can occur more easily when personal human contact and connection are allowed to take place. Mike Williams writes a regular column for our local newspaper, Hawke's Bay Today. He is the CEO of the New Zealand Howard League, which assists people in prison and those newly released. He recently had a very telling comment to make. Before I read it, I'll just explain the acronym NEETS, N-E-E-T-S. It refers to those not in employment, education or training. It's often younger people, and sadly, those who frequently land up in prison. Mike wrote, "Over the years, I have observed that the initiatives with real effect on the lives of lost souls like NEETs and prisoners have in common the fact that they are based on one-on-one human attention. Whether it's getting young offenders licenses or teaching illiterate prisoners to read, to look after bees or to knit beanies for babies, it's the face-to-face attention, in other words, connectivity, of supportive helper that counts most. In Te Reo Māori, this is kanohi ki te kanohi, which means face-to-face or in the flesh. I'm going to relate a first-hand experience of the profound effect meeting and connecting between very different people can have. In the early 90s, I had a friend by the name of David who shared a house with his widowed father. His father was a New Zealand Navy veteran from the Second World War. He was never taken prisoner by the Japanese, nor ever seriously wounded. Sadly though, like many Allied war survivors of his generation, he utterly despised the Japanese and never had a single good word to say for anything Japanese. David went to Sydney on a holiday, and while there he met and befriended a young Japanese couple. They kept in touch long after the trip, and David invited them to New Zealand to stay in the shared family home. His father was horrified and very angry, shouting that he would never, ever have any bleep bleep Japs under his roof. However, plans went ahead and the couple arrived to stay for 3 weeks. At first, the father was just barely polite. He tried really hard not to like these people. They were delightful, and they had a great time meeting many ordinary New Zealanders and doing New Zealand things. They won the old man over, and he ended up enjoying their company and learning so much about modern Japanese life and culture. This close personal contact worked its magic. He was forced to reconsider his rigid and prejudiced concept of an entire nation, which he would have taken to his grave, but for this happy, face-to-face, proper human connection. In November last year, on Armistice Day, commemorations to mark 100 years since the ending of the First World War were held in various locations around the planet. At the Paris service, the French President, Emmanuel Macron, drew attention to and warned against a rising tide of nationalism and separatism currently sweeping the world. Ideologies which, in the past, he noted, have led to hideous and senseless wars. And he's right, of course. Knowledge and understanding about each other as nations, respecting, accepting, and allowing our differences, celebrating them even, but sharing the planet, can surely only be achieved by meaningful connections, not by selfishness and isolation. These connections and working together globally are possibly more important in our present time than ever before, and the only way to a safer, better world. Now shall we take the word responsibility and see what that conjures up? For me it relates to being answerable, responding to the call in a reliable and dependable way, living within the law, stepping up, keeping one's word, protecting from harm, and many other qualities too. How we respond and how seriously we take our responsibilities, I believe, is determined by how much connection we feel towards those or that for which we are responsible. And of course, with every bit of possession, power, or privilege comes an equal measure of responsibility, a fact which we frequently ignore. Rupert Sheldrake, whom Betty has mentioned a couple of times, the English biologist, is best known for researching and writing about morphic resonance. He talks about events and patterns in nature affecting future events, about collective memory not necessarily stored in the dense physical plane, so that the subtle planes hold this memory as causes for later in time. His theory reinforces what the ageless wisdom teaches about the interconnectedness and the unity of our universe. The Indian theosophist Surendra Narayan, in his book Life is for Living, quotes Rupert Sheldrake in an interview with Quest magazine as saying, quote, "The morphic resonance idea says that both good and bad patterns will propagate by morphic resonance. There is no moral filter in the principle, only in the choices we make. And the moral implication is that whatever we do or even think, whatever attitude we have, can affect other people. The principle of morphic resonance implies much greater responsibility than we might otherwise have assumed." Unquote. And then Surendra adds this: "This responsibility arises because we are all in relationship with each other and everything that exists, with all life in the universe. Our consciousness and all its various expressions affect not only our own being, but others as well, for good or for ill. That is why the great teachers of humanity have exhorted us to be mindful about our actions in thought, words, and deed." Unquote. And these words can truly prick the conscience should it become a little sleepy. As I alluded to earlier, some of the connections and subsequent responsibilities with which we are faced in our daily lives surely have a karmic origin. And if that be the case, then the manner in which we attend to them, and even our attitude towards that attention, must influence our future karma. Maybe something to bear in mind at the times when we feel overburdened and overwhelmed by duties, those times when our attitude is most tested. I was indeed fortunate to be born to very responsible parents. We didn't have much in the material sense, but we children never experienced one iota of neglect. My grandparents and other grown-up role models were also good, responsible people. Therefore, responsibility was learned largely by example, and it was discussed at times also. However, I don't believe I truly understood the meaning of responsibility until my first child was born when I was barely 19 years old. After 5 or 6 days in the safety and security of the nursing home, my husband and I took our precious bundle home. The very next morning he left for work. And for the first time I was left quite alone with this very beloved but totally helpless and dependent little person in my care. Suddenly dawned on me the huge responsibility ahead of nurturing, protecting, raising, teaching, and guiding this new life for many years to come. I have to admit that more than a little panic followed that realization. And although I didn't manage all those high ideals to perfection, she did survive and thrive, and 2 more babies followed. But just imagine for a moment, if you will, what this world could be if each one of us felt that responsibility for every new life on this planet. Wow, what a world it would be. Alas, I don't believe it will be possible so long as we feel a sense of separation and sometimes fear of one another. But we can continue to work towards that goal, that wonderful world, and trust that someday it will be so. I recently came upon a very appropriate quote from Pablo Casals, the musician. He said, "You must work, we must all work to make the world worthy of its children." I'm sure you can all identify with that personal event in my life because you may well have experienced a similar feeling in different circumstances. I believe we actually need to experience that feeling of close connection and the responsibility that accompanies it right here in our hearts, to be able to apply those attributes to a wider and wider community. When we can start to feel the same genuine compassion and care for complete and not always attractive strangers as we do for our nearest and dearest, we will indeed be making good progress. Perhaps our collective responsibility extends beyond care just for our fellow human beings. I believe Annie Besant referred to members of the animal kingdom as our younger brothers and sisters, and indeed, many people feel a huge closeness and connection to animals. We know many species have become or are becoming or in danger of becoming extinct, partly through human encroachment and poaching, also sometimes involving bad farming practices and greed, overfishing and wasteful fishing methods. Some humans display barbaric cruelty to animals who cannot protect themselves. It is not possible for us all to set out to save wild creatures, as good as that would be, but we can be more mindful and therefore responsible about what we buy, consume, and support. Over the long centuries of our human history, there have been those who have spent almost their entire lives in unselfish and dutiful service to another or others. And these people should be an inspiration to us all. Some have served in a small and unsung domestic role, caring tirelessly and patiently for a sick or disabled family member. Others have served a cause which benefits untold numbers of fellow beings. One such example, of course, and someone close to our hearts as Theosophists, is Helena Blavatsky. HPB carried her responsibility to the society she had co-founded to the highest levels. She felt she had a duty to make available the ageless wisdom teachings to all who could hear, and she sacrificed a great deal to that end. And all this because, firstly, she felt a huge connection and reverence for her master, and she understood in her heart the connectedness of all beings, and therefore a responsibility to make the world a better place. Annie Besant, too, long before she had heard of Theosophy, was a champion of freedom and justice, a true philanthropist, an activist, not merely a theorist. For example, she fought to improve the lot of the poor little match girls in England, and later she did much to encourage and assist India to regain its independence after too many years of colonial rule. She founded the Theosophical Order of Service, of course. Annie got out there among people. She connected. She felt their need and then did what she could to help. She gave her energy and devotion to numerous projects as a very responsible and connected citizen of the world. In the Theosophical Classic, At the Feet of the Master, 4 qualifications are given to the aspirant. The first is discrimination. In modern terms, this word is sometimes given a negative spin, but here, of course, its meaning is more to do with discretion and discernment. There are times when these qualities should go hand in hand with responsibility. I'm referring to the old question of, should I feed a hungry man a fish or teach him how to fish? Perhaps feed him first and then teach him how. But my point is that sometimes our responsibility lies in empowering, enabling and encouraging others to effectively carry out their own duties and be responsible, rather than killing with kindness. Charities such as our own TOS frequently use donated funds to purchase equipment and provide training in order to assist people to lift themselves out of dire poverty or adverse circumstances. And of course, the same principle can be applied to individual and more personal situations. So, as Theosophists, can we resolve to walk the talk and stay connected to those around us through love and joy, or through pain and difficulty in a non-judgmental way? Can we share the good and also the not so good? Let us make a pact with ourselves to be responsible, to answer the call whenever and wherever we are able to. And I'm going to conclude with my favourite quote from Mother Teresa, who said, "We cannot all do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. With those encouraging words in mind, we can all answer the call, each and every day, even if sometimes it is only with a smile, an expression of gratitude, or a kind word or gesture. Thank you very much.